Hello, everybody, and welcome again back to Procrastinator's Pitch Stop. We have another amazing guest for you today, Jeremy George. Jeremy, an entrepreneur and TEDx speaker, founded the What a Year project, aiming to complete 52 bucket list goals in 52 weeks, from cliff jumping to overcoming stage fright. As founder and CEO of Bucket Match, he now connects like minded people through their bucket list using AI to help turn their dreams into reality. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Chris. Happy to be here.
Excellent, excellent. Now, before we get too much into it, we do have a little bit of an icebreaker here that we usually have on the show. And the question for you today is, which cartoon character do you resonate with the most and why?
It's a good one. I had heard a couple of your episodes, so I knew the icebreaker was coming, and I was very curious what the question would be today. Cartoon character. I think there are a few that came to mind. Probably the one that comes to mind the strongest is Tommy from Rugrats. I don't know if you remember Tommy, but yeah, always loved Tommy, and I think what I really loved about him is that he was incredibly courageous, incredibly bold, very adventurous, willing to go into the unknown. And I'd like to think that in some ways, that's how I like to lead my life as well. So I'd say Tommy from Rugrats.
Excellent, awesome choice, awesome choice. Yeah, little bald baby, always wearing a full diaper, but always a smile on his face.
Exactly. I don't know
Love
if
that, love that.
stylistically, I don't know if we're on the same page, but yes, personality wise.
Okay. Right. So now, we'd like to know a little bit more about you, Jeremy. So, can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to be where you are today?
Sure. Let's see. So I think the short of it is, I spent about a decade working at various software companies. So everything from like Amazon to small startups, and that was the bulk of my career. Um, I think the crux or the reason that you and I are chatting today is I had an opportunity a few years ago to leave my job working in sort of corporate tech. And I decided to pursue this very different ambition where I tried to do 52 things from my bucket list, 52 weeks, as you mentioned. So 1 year. Um, and the reason for that really is I had hit a point in my life where I felt like I was doing the things I was quote unquote supposed to be doing. I was making more money than I'd ever made before. I had the highest title I'd ever had. Had great friends and relationships, but I felt very unfulfilled. And that actually led me to a darker period where I started to question whether or not I could actually truly be happy or if I would just continuously be chasing these milestones that were set out for me. And then COVID happened. And I think all of us were sort of forced to reconcile with the reality that your life can be turned upside down at any given moment. And for me, it really hit on a visceral level, realizing that I wasn't actually happy, even though I was doing these things that I thought I should. So why not flip the script and do a bunch of things that maybe I'm not supposed to do, but that are important to me? And so that's why I turned to my bucket list. The rest is history. It was really quite a transformation in terms of my view on life and what makes me happy.
Well, I mean, that's great. I mean, everybody should be getting to that bucket list, because again, like you said, you never know. So, tell me, in building Bucket Match, or even in going through your 52 weeks of one a week, that sounds really really challenging. What do you think was your biggest challenge?
Yeah, good question. And it's funny. I guess I should state I didn't actually achieve all 52. Right, I ended up getting 32 out of the 52 done, which by academic standards is a D minus at best. But for me, it was the pursuit of these goals that actually mattered, right? And that's what ultimately brought me happiness and the community and connecting with others around these goals. But it was definitely a challenge. Some of the goals were really easy, but the hardest one I would say was I biked down the California coast from San Francisco to San Diego. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area and I went to college in San Diego. So I'd done that drive, many, many times, but I never really stopped to just enjoy the coastline and to actually experience it more intimately. And that was always a goal of mine, was to do this bike ride. But I had never actually really biked like that before I took on this ambition. Really, I had only done city bikes in New York City and beach cruisers on the beach. So it was a big learning process, a learning curve in terms of how to actually use a road bike, what gear to get, planning out the route, doing the training. recruiting friends to join me along the way, but really rewarding experience.
That's awesome. And it just actually puts into place sort of the next question I had, especially when we're talking bucket lists, there's often a lot of procrastination involved. How would you how would you define procrastination and what does it mean to you personally?
Yeah, and I mean, that's what I'm excited to dig into. I think for me, it was this deep realization that I had been procrastinating on these goals of mine, right? These truly intimate goals, and I was replacing them with other things that I thought society expected of me, or things that I should be doing that would ultimately lead to some kind of successful outcome, right? Which you realize once you meet that goal that it was actually totally arbitrary. Um, and so for me, I think procrastinating is failing to actually reconcile with what truly matters to you. There are different ways that people can figure that out. For me, in kind of a morbid way, it was actually death and the anticipation of death and the reconciliation of the fact that we will all die someday, right? That's what really helped force everything into perspective. There have been countless studies done on what do we feel is the meaning at the end of our lives. But one in particular that stands out, I think it was a study done by Cornell University professors. They found that 76% of people, when they're lying on their deathbed, will look back on their lives and they don't regret the things they did. They're more likely to regret the things they didn't do, right? The creative pursuits that they never went after, the romantic interests that they never talked to, the new job, right, that they didn't go after, starting a business, starting a nonprofit, whatever it is. Most of us will regret not at least giving it a shot. And that really stuck with me. And that's when I realized that I've been procrastinating on all these things for no real reason other than just not feeling like it was on my path yet. And as soon as I decided to start actively and deliberately pursuing them, I found a lot more meaning in life. And that's led me to start the company that I have now.
So, what would you say is a secret sauce to you overcoming procrastination? Would you say it was that realization of the life, or was it something else? Did you do any other steps?
I think that, I think if you were to look for like a silver bullet or a secret sauce, for me personally, and I don't think it needs to be this way for everybody, but it does come from a darker place. I think it comes from a point of pain. And for, I think, a lot of us, that can be really powerful. If because you were procrastinating, eventually you got to a really bad place and you hit rock bottom, and that is painful, that can sometimes be the emotion that you need to catalyze a change. Hopefully most of us don't get there, right? But for me, that is truly what it was, was relieving pain. But I do think that outside of that like singular moment, the most important thing is just slowly but surely expanding the edge of our comfort zone and having the willingness to go a little bit outside of it and trying something, knowing that you still have a safety net. But over time, as you continue to expand your comfort zone, it becomes easier to not procrastinate on those things. And it becomes easier to take that initial first step of whatever it is that you want to do or should be doing.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's maybe a little bit. So it's kind of like taking the first step. So bucket match. Could you, just for our audience, let us know a little bit more about bucket match itself and how it sort of helps you to get over that sort of first hump?
Totally. Bucket Match is an online platform that helps people conquer their bucket lists. And the way that we do that is we leverage AI to help connect you with relevant people and helpful resources to help you actually turn those ideas into reality. And so what you can imagine is it's essentially a platform. You go in, you tell us everything that's on your bucket list, and then Bucket Match's job is to understand what you want to accomplish. And we're connecting you with other people that maybe have that same goal who can join you along, or maybe someone who's already done that thing can help mentor you, coach you through the process, or simply just someone to help hold you accountable to whatever it is.
So what do you think would be one of your greatest maybe success stories from Bucket Match?
That's a good one. A friend of mine actually just recently developed a video game, and that was the biggest goal on his bucket list for the longest time, and he'd never done this before. And he didn't really have the courage to actually take that first step until Bucket Match had connected him with someone else who had already developed a video game. And then that sort of manifested into this relationship where he really actually just gathered confidence from this friend more than, real tips, resources, or guidance. It was just the confidence to say, hey, if so-and-so can do it, why not me? And so his name is Tom. Tom went and he started his video game. He obviously went through many iterations, and it ended up being a much longer process than he expected. But the quote that I always love from him is, if it wasn't for Bucket Match, he would have never even started in the first place. And so I think that's really what it is our goal is just to help you take that first step. And typically having someone else in your corner really helps accelerate that process.
And no, that definitely makes a lot of sense. And in your opinion, why do you think we put off the bucket list so long?
There are three main reasons. The most obvious one, I think, is the deadline, right? If you think about the definition of a bucket list, it's a list of things you want to do before you die. And thankfully for most of us, that doesn't feel so imminent, right? It's not something that's going to happen next year or the year after. And so we believe that we have this time. We falsely believe that we have all this time to actually attack it. And so without having an urgent deadline, everything else becomes a higher priority and ends up getting done, right? Work deadlines, family deadlines, relationships, etc. It's not to say that those aren't important, but there is a hierarchy of urgency that we need to reconcile with. The second big one is truly just resources, whether it's feeling like you don't have enough time, feeling like you don't have enough money. There are, in some cases, real legitimate obstacles that prevent people from attacking their bucket lists. I would argue, of course, that you can still start. We often think that we have to finish our goal in order to start it, but it's always best to start knowing that you might not finish. And then the third and final one is fear. So depending on what the goal is, many of us fear the initial failure, fear the rejection, fear embarrassment, whatever it is. Especially the more intimate the goal, the harder it is to get over that emotional hurt.
Actually, you said something interesting there with the second point, which is a very interesting topic. You said that you start the goal with the knowledge that you may never finish it.
Mm-hmm.
And so finding the motivation could be a little bit more difficult. And that's sort of where having those mentors or accountability partners or other motivators can come in play, right?
100%, yeah. And I'm curious, of course, in your line of work as well, how much you see other people are having a community around you or mentors, how much that helps people get over their initial procrastination. But that's a big part of it is, at least in my world, folks get so caught up on crossing the item off their list, which is the outcome, right? That they forget that the anticipation, the process, the journey is actually where 85% of the enjoyment comes from. Yes, it feels really good to cross it off, but the bulk of the actual satisfaction from the experience is just in the pursuit of it. And so that's why I say it's important to start a goal knowing that you might not ever finish it.
No, and you're absolutely right. I mean, many of us have that same kind of fear. It's not exactly a fear of failure. It's kind of, it just looks too big, right? Like you mentioned that some of your goals, I mean, some of them were, cliff jumping, overcoming stage fright. And some of those might look, impossible at first glance, right? So how do you break down those really big items on your bucket list? Is there a process you take?
Yeah, well, the very honest answer is we use AI for that. So what we'll essentially say is, hey, we know that Chris has this goal. You tell us a little bit about what your goal is through what we call a vision board. So essentially a vision board is where you can say, hey, if my goal is to, go cliff jumping in Hawaii, then we ask you to fill out a vision board, which is really just asking questions. Who do you want to do it with? When do you want to do it? Why is this important to you? Are there any pictures and videos that will help you visualize it? So you're enriching our understanding of what this goal really means to you. And the reason that's important is for some people, cliff jumping in Hawaii might be like a fear of overcoming a fear of heights, right? It's a very different foundation versus someone who's like, oh, I cliff jump everywhere in the world. I still haven't done Hawaii. That would be, number 50 on my list. Very same experience, but very different reason behind it. Once we understand what your motivations are, why this is important to you, help you visualize success, then we'll create what we call a 7-step action plan, basically, leveraging generative AI to say, hey, this is what Chris wants to do. Here's why he wants to do it. Here's everything we know. Can you help me give him a clear plan, steps 1 through 7, on how he can get it done? So that's the short of it. Now, what I would say anecdotally, personally, I think that the most important thing is just getting started. And usually getting started means looping someone else in. Once you have someone looped into your corner, things will get easier. You'll be able to delegate. You'll be able to bounce ideas off each other. They might even be able to help you save money, depending on what the goal is. Having, leveraging the internet and leveraging our networks to be able to have help on your side goes along.
Excellent, excellent. And so you mentioned 7 steps. Are there only ever 7, or do you break those 7 down even further, or sometimes there are more steps?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm forgetting why we landed on 7. For some reason, 7 was an optimal number. I think there was a study done behind it. But yes, within those 7, we will always have subtasks, right? So I call them steps. Really, they're milestones of different things. It could be something as simple as, do your preliminary research is sort of milestone number 1. Milestone number 2 might be make your first purchase. So if you want to go on a trip, it's, book the flight or book the hotel. If you want to get over stage fright, it's, book that speaking class or book that gig, that open mic gig, whatever it is. So there will be various milestones, but then within each milestone, a number of subtasks. And that's where, again, I think it really helps to be aligned with someone who's gone through the process before, who's maybe achieved this bucket list goal already, and they can show you the ropes so that you don't have to make the same mistakes that they did in pursuit of your goal. Get it done a lot more quickly. And again, like I said, it's usually more fun when you have other people here.
No, for sure. Having an accountability partner can, make it more fun because then you're sharing the experience as well.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there are some things on bucket lists that some people might prefer to do alone, but statistically speaking, it is more fun to do things in groups.
Totally. And you bring up a good point. Oh, sorry, just a quick comment. Yeah, you bring up a good point that there are some goals that people prefer to do alone and also maybe prefer to keep to themselves. And so that's candidly a challenge that I think will continue to evolve around over time. But I think a true bucket list probably has things that you might not feel comfortable sharing with the world quite yet. And I think that's really valuable and really important too, right? And so a constant challenge of mine is to figure out how can we still help guide people through that process, even if they're not telling us what they want to do, if they're not telling us a lot about why this matters to them. At the end of the day, our mission is to help people live a life where they measure the richness of their life based on the experiences that they share. And so whatever we can do to help people, even if they don't feel comfortable getting someone else looped in, that's something that I'm focused on as well.
Yeah, that's very true as well. And in one of the things that I tend to practice as well is that no goal is really too small.
Yes.
Some people just want to be a fry cook for the entire life, like SpongeBob, right? I go back to SpongeBob a lot just because there's a lot of messages in that cartoon. But anyway, to get back on topic, no item and no goal is really too small. I mean, it's all personal preference, but I'm curious, what would you say, what would you say is one of maybe the most interesting or one of the biggest sort of items on a bucket list that you might have seen in bucket?
That's a good one. Before I answer that, can I ask you a quick question? You had asked me at the beginning who my cartoon character would be. Would your answer have been SpongeBob?
I mean, no, like who I resonate with the most? No, I resonate the most with actually more with Deadpool. Just because, he's always wanting to help. He's, for a long time, I felt like a one-trick pony where, I was kind of stuck in the same spot.
Yeah.
So I kind of resonated a lot with Deadpool, but I do fall back a lot on SpongeBob just because in SpongeBob you've got the representation of many different things. You've got sort of like anger and Squidward. You've got the bubbly SpongeBob. You've got the greedy Mr. Krabs, right? He's always out there for the money. So it's a silly show, but there are a lot of messages in it, so I do kind of use it. Some people like that I use it, some people don't, but still a good example.
No, I think it's a great example. It certainly captures a wide variety, like you mentioned, of different emotions. And I don't know anyone who hasn't at least seen SpongeBob. I do know some people don't love it, but I think everyone can relate. Okay, cool. I was just curious about that. Your question was, what's the most ambitious goal that I've seen in Bucket Match? The one that stands out the most, and is maybe not the right answer, but the one that stands out is there are a lot of people that want to go to outer space. I've been seeing that more recently. So I don't know how we're going to help them get there yet, but I have heard of stories of different folks who, without major wealth or major connections, are finding ways to get into outer space. Not that they've done it yet, but there are, these wait lists where people are being collected for different expeditions to outer space and, 2030, something like that. So put it on your bucket list today, and maybe 10 years from now, we'll be able to help you get it done.
Well, I think maybe that actually makes a lot of sense, simply because maybe, 10, 20 years ago, the thought of going to space was just way, way, way out of reach, right?
Right.
But with current technology, I mean, they sent, was it SpaceX sent somebody to, they sent two guys to space on the Dragon, and they had a tablet and two chairs. I mean, now I guess maybe you're seeing that more just because it's more realistic now, I guess, right?
Totally. Well, and I think it goes back to, I think many of us have heard the story of the first ever 4-minute mile, which maybe you're familiar with. But as soon as the first person to ever finish running a mile in less than 4 minutes, I think it was like within the next year, I don't know, 12 people or something, some, relatively large number of people also beat that record, even though for centuries it had never been beat before. I think as a human species, we tend to, once we see that someone else can do it, and that's what we need to believe that it's possible, then we're able to actually push our limits and actually make it possible and to dream about that. So I think we're seeing the same thing with space travel. And often you see that with a lot of goals, which again is why I think it's so important in Bucket Match to not keep your goal in your head, which is where most of us do. 90%, roughly, depending on the study you look at, 90% of Americans have a bucket list. Only 30% of that 90 will actually write it down. So most of us keep our goals in our heads. And by writing it down, by sharing it with other people, you diffuse the enormity of what this bucket list goal is, and it starts to feel much more feasible because you hear about other people who did it, who had never done it before. You start to piece together an action plan. And so that's why I think it's so important to just confront it, and then we'll stop procrastinating on the goal and you'll actually start making progress towards it.
Actually, you bring up a really good point there too about how everybody sort of wants to, once they've seen other people do that goal, they know other things are possible and they start to move on. But I am curious now, actually, because it just brought to mind Mount Everest and like climbing Mount Everest. I remember back in the 90s that was a big deal, and but now I didn't know this until pretty recently. There are thousands of people that climb Mount Everest every single year. I was like, I did not know that.
Right.
So it's
No, totally.
it's interesting. I would have thought that once a few hundred people would have climbed it, they would have said, "Ah, no, I'm not doing it anymore." But thousands of people still go. Do you get people that say, "Well, climb Everest on Bucket Match"?
We do. Yeah. It's definitely, it's a common one. Or folks that, just want to get to the base camp, maybe not climb the whole thing, but at least get out there. So yeah, that's a more, I don't want to say cliche because I think it's still obviously a very legitimate bucket list goal. But yeah, we see that on there along with, less crazy adventurous one. A lot of people want to see the Northern Lights, see the pyramids of Giza, a lot of the typical, the classics, I would call them.
Yeah, well, that raises another question. Do you classify any of these bucket lists in terms of extremity or potential dangers? Because I mean, climbing Mount Everest, even though thousands of people do it every year, like there's still a lot of unfortunate accidents, and seeing the Northern Lights is, pretty safe comparatively. Do you guys separate out anything like that in Bucket Match?
So we don't today, but it's definitely something that I want to get a better grasp on for a number of reasons. But most importantly, I think it's for, the safety and assurance of our users, right? At the end of the day, I want to promote people going out there and living life and experiencing things. And it's sort of ironic being a technology company. I'm trying to get people away from their technology, away from your devices, out doing stuff. But we know that technology is a helpful medium to get there. But with that said, we also have to be really cognizant about making sure that people are doing things safely, right? There's obviously, so our slogan here is take the leap, which is really intended to say, you know what, if you see where you want to go, just jump, right? But of course, there is the risk that if you jump, you don't land where you needed to and you'll fall. And Mount Everest is a good example of folks that shouldn't do it without having done the proper preparation and research and all of that. And even if it's not Everest, there are a lot of other goals in Bucket Match that still do have some risk associated with them. So, that's a long way of saying, no, we haven't figured it out yet. It's difficult to understand the level of risk, danger, or a skill that's required, largely because we don't know our users well enough yet. If I'm someone who has never climbed before, trying to climb Mount Everest is going to be there's a huge delta in terms of where I'm at today and what I need to be. But for someone else in Bucket Match who maybe is an experienced mountaineer, they do this all the time. Maybe they lead, tour groups. That's not such a risk endeavor for them to take on. And so as we get to know our users better, hopefully we'll be able to be smarter about identifying those types of things.
Actually, that just kind of raised an idea in my head. You just mentioned actually in your own personal story too, and you said that you wanted to enjoy the coastline and you'd never really undertaken any sort of trip like that before. Is it in the future plans maybe for Bucket Match to say you want to climb Mount Everest? Say, okay, we see you want to climb Mount Everest. Why don't we try these, three goals in preparation for that goal?
It's a really good idea that I've heard a few times now of like, hey, how can Bucket Match help me, understand what those sort of baby milestones would be for this much larger goal? I really like that idea. The challenge, as with everything, of course, becomes how do we make it super relevant and how do we make sure that the technology doesn't mislead you in some way and give you something that doesn't actually directly contribute, which is just a larger problem of the fact that people have goals, across so many different categories. So even if we get really good at recommending milestones for physical adventures, like, climbing Mount Everest or biking 600 miles, some people say, I want to start a business. Right, the roadmap and the mini milestones to get there very different than climbing a mountain. Even though often folks will make the analogy that starting a business is very much like climbing a mountain. So it's incumbent on us to figure out like what are those similarities, what are those parallels, and how can we find a way to sort of still create that roadmap for folks, even if it's not perfect. Right, again, just to help you take that first step and I just keep coming back to this word because we're on the procrastinator's pit stop, but to not procrastinate and just start, right? That's the biggest thing. Just take that first step. And whether it's climbing a mountain or starting a business, the first step is usually pretty similar.
Nope, that is very true. The first step is definitely crucial because you need that to create the momentum. Sounds like that Bucket Match has a lot of momentum, and that kind of segues into my next question. So what's next for Bucket Match? Where do you see yourself in the next year?
The answer to that question changes like every week. We're still very early in our development. So it's one of those things where I have a really strong conviction about where we'll be and a lot of flexibility to recognize that the path might change. So what I say today might change, a month from now. But my belief is that a year from today, Bucket Match will be a marketplace that allows experts to basically monetize on their expertise. So what I mean by that is if you think about all of the bucket list goals that we have, so Bucket Match is totally free to use today, right? Anyone can sign up, you tell us what's on your bucket list goal, and then we just try to match you with other people that can be helpful. But we're starting to see a lot of themes in the types of goals that people have, and we're starting to see themes in the types of things that people have already done. So whether it's seeing the Northern Lights, as I mentioned, climbing a mountain, a lot of people want to do like surf retreats or spiritual retreats in certain areas. There are businesses and there are people that provide coaching, that provide services directly related to those types of goals, right? We also have a lot of people that want to learn how to speak a new language on their bucket list. That's a really common one. And so what I'm envisioning is just a marketplace where we're democratizing access to that. So if you're a Spanish teacher, right? Or if you're a surf instructor, or if you're a mountain climber, and you have the ability, you have the expertise, and you have the qualification to actually help other people who have that on their bucket list, I would love for Bucket Match to be that connection, basically, and being the one that introduces folks so we can all help each other achieve our bucket list goals and also, help some people make money along the way.
Hey, I mean, that sounds like a really great vision, to all our listeners, just, be sure to check it out. I mean, what have you got to lose? I mean, you got to put all your bucket wishes there and just see what kind of shakes out of the tree, so to speak.
Yeah.
We are coming up pretty close to the time, Jeremy. It's been a pleasure having you. Is there anything that maybe I didn't ask that you wish I had asked, or maybe something you feel we should have covered that we didn't cover today?
It's a great question. I mean, my gut instinct is no. Obviously I just enjoyed the dialogue and conversation. I wanted to ask you a question, if that's okay. What I don't know if you have a bucket list written down, but I would be curious if you were to think of your bucket list, what's something on your bucket list that you would want to do?
You know what's really funny about me is that I've done pretty much everything that I could. Like, if I were to die today, not saying I want to, but if I were to die today, um, I would not. I would not have very many,
That's
for
fantastic.
sure.
Yep.
I think the one thing that would be on my bucket list though, and honestly, is I'm gonna do it. I haven't decided when though, because there is a great amount. And this is why I was asking you about the danger aspect, because there is a great amount of dangers in there. So
Uh,
I'm thinking, I was thinking of waiting until I was pretty sure I was tired completely of being here before I tried it. But the Red Bull jump, went to space and he did a free fall for 7 minutes.
yeah, yeah.
I think my bucket list would be to honestly um just jump, like go to the upper stratosphere and then just jump down and free fall for 7 minutes while listening to some sort of music.
That's epic. Yeah. Oh, that's
Yeah,
epic.
that would be on my bucket list. But
Cool. I love
for
it.
obvious reasons, I'm a little hesitant to do that.
Yep. Yep.
Maybe when my daughter's 18 and I don't have to take care of her anymore. But right now, it's like it's a little bit too risky, I think so.
Totally, totally. And and that goes back to one of the three things is just not having the resources available yet. Your time is better allocated to providing for your family and doing these things. And so that is what you should do before you make that leap. Take the leap, literally. The slogan of Bucket Match. But yeah, I hope I hope someday you're able to, and hopefully Bucket Match is able to help you get that done. Might not be for a couple decades, but that's the beauty of a bucket list.
Well, there's that, and I'm sure you've seen it on Bucket Match as well. Storm chasing, I think, was pretty popular.
Yep.
Riding out inside a storm.
Yeah.
Like
I
some of those things are really dangerous, but those was the interesting thing that came to mind.
yeah, yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
we are going to wrap up here now, Jeremy. But just before we go, what is the best way for our listeners to reach out to you if they have questions or they just want to touch base and learn more about Bucket Match?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the best place would be to go to www.bucketmatch.ai. That's my website. That's where you can join the wait list for the actual product itself, or we have a contact page in the footer of the website, and that will send an email directly to me. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Jeremy George, Bucket Match. I'm sure if you search that, my profile will pop up. And I would love to hear from you. Even if you're not ready to become a Bucket Match user yet, if you're at all inspired just to talk about, taking the first step on a bucket list goal of yours, I'd love to be in touch and happy to be your accountability buddy, if nothing else.
All right, sounds good. Well, once again, thank you so much for being on the show today, Jeremy. It's a very interesting topic. It's a very good initiative. I encourage all our listeners to go and take a look at that. And definitely don't put off today if it's within grasp or within reason. And if it's not, write it out. Go to Bucket Match and see if you can get the resources in time to go do that. And thank you once again for tuning in. Just remember, if you can't find that inspiration or motivation for yourself today, maybe go out and be that motivation and inspiration for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.